certainly we're going to begin with skiing, which is a sport, I guess. Yes, it's the best intro you're getting, Craig. Tell us about Downhill Racer.
The act of going down snow on a couple of bits of wood. The debut feature of director Michael Ritchie, 1969's Downhill Racer, sees Robert Redford play David Chapelette, a largely unknown yet naturally gifted and ambitious alpine skier who finally has the chance to make his mark on the US national team when injury strikes the roster. Headed by Coach Claire, Gene Hackman, the team are determined to shed their reputation as perennial underachievers on the global stage and take on the big boys of Europe on the slopes of Austria at a forthcoming event, which I can't remember. Is it supposed to be the Winter Olympics?
It is, yes.
Right, okay.
It does actually mention that it was made with the help of the Winter Olympic or the Olympic Association at some point.
That's right. I just couldn't remember if it was actually specifically stated in the film that that's what it was supposed to be, because no one seems to mention, hey, isn't it great we're at the Olympics? Never mind. Chapelette.
No, they do mention the Olympics.
Do they? Oh, okay. I must have
understand why you missed it.
Yes, I must have tuned out at that point. Chapelette does little to endear himself to his teammates, not that he pretends to have designs on doing so, just one eye on individual achievement and the other, more often than not, focused largely on the many fine-looking women at the periphery of their winter sport. It's an attitude that frustrates Claire, and it is this emotional fulcrum on which the often unbearable tension and exquisite drama of Downhill Racer hinges. Or at least it does in the Craig cut, I was imagining, half an hour into the runtime, and then really anticipating at the hour mark, and then scratching my head about at 90 minutes, and then lamenting the absolute absence of 10 minutes later as the credits rolled. Yes, folks, the Craig cut of Downhill Racer is a thing of wonder and much more in keeping with the expectations raised for me by someone who now finds their contact details conveniently lost from my phone. Who dis? It's the guy you owe an hour and 40 plus change. The reality of Downhill Racer as it presents itself is quite baffling, especially considering the near universal critical acclaim lauded upon it. And I'd love to at least explain the plot a little further, only there isn't much more to say. Chapelette races, gets better, irritates his teammates, chases an entirely underutilised Camilla Sparv, who plays Carol, the PA of a renowned ski manufacturer, and repeat, until eventually the movie concludes with Chapelette winning the big race, not by being the best in the field, but by watching the best in the field take a dry bath a couple of 100 yards from the finish line. Not dramatic enough to be a drama, not abstract enough to be performance art, Downhill Racer just kind of is. Granted, a 32-year-old Robert Redford is astonishing to look at, particularly in a roll-neck sweater, but he's also an entirely unlikable presence who isn't held accountable for his attitude in any respect whatsoever, besides perhaps being blown off by Carol, which upsets him for all of 5 minutes before he's off eyeing up his next conquest. This is a strange beast, and I'm very unhappy because on paper I'm supposed to love it. Release the Craig cut!
It's not good, is it? Although,
well, everybody seems to think it is.
Well, yes, that's what I was going to say, Craig. It was incredibly well regarded at the time. It's in the Criterion Collection, although that on its own is not a it's not a mark of quality as we've discussed in the past. Although no monkeys in this one, which is to its detriment, obviously. Yeah, but it's very well regarded. It's in the Criterion Collection. It's considered as a great sports movie, and it's absolute gash. I don't think I'd even heard of this film before you mentioned it for this, and I went to this very, very cold. And it starts off with some shots of people skiing, as you'd imagine, although not for the first time in the film. Some
strong start.
Some very obviously badly sped up footage.
Yeah,
that just sticks out like a sore thumb. To presumably fake the idea of them going faster than they actually are, but it looks like sped up footage because it's sped up footage.
It's either sped up or undercranked. I can't tell which, but it's properly jarring.
Yeah, it's amateur hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
But starts off with that, but then what got me, and I knew nothing about the film at all, and it's from the 60s. And it's got 60s era spy thriller music at the start. I thought, this is maybe not what I think it is. Maybe it's like the CIA recruiting a skier because he's going to be in Eastern Europe or the Soviet Union or something. Like, it's not. It's a spy film. Oh, no. Just spy music for some reason, and use like at least the first half of the film quite a lot. Why is that there? That is completely inappropriate.
All of it. Spy music. Not a section that had its own divider in HMV, but we all know what you mean.
Yes, I'm sure you do, because you've seen spy films before. And so that kind of set me off on the wrong foot to begin with. Because that music was so obvious, and it carries so much significance, that kind of music. So I thought, oh, right. And immediately
it lends itself to the suggestion of intrigue or suspense, certainly.
Yes, exactly. And so I had my own cut in my head that I'd invented a better film within the first 30 seconds, where, it was a Cold War spy thriller, a literal Cold War spy thriller, if you will. And I know you won't, but I don't care. And then it gets on, it's this absolute pillock who I don't believe cares about skiing or possibly cares about anything at all for the whole runtime of the film. Because Chaplet, he's a git. He's not likeable. He's not interesting. And I honestly don't believe the entire film that he cares about skiing at all. And then you have his other teammates who are definitely there. There's the guy he's racing and puts into a wall near the end, and the guy ends up in a hospital after a crash. He's got a face, and there's probably some hair near that face, and that's about it. I mean, we're supposed to care about what happened. He's completely anonymous, as is almost everybody in it.
Imagine, right, you've touched on a really interesting bit there, Drew, because I sort of perked up a little bit at the end where he goes off on that race with his roommate, doesn't he? Much to the annoyance of Claire. They set off in this sort of like, I suppose it's ostensibly good-natured, but it's obviously hyper-competitive. He and his teammate, who he shares a room with, off in this race, and then the bit where his mate basically barrels into a brick wall. Now, I know enough about the Kennedys to know that that's bad news if you ski into the side of something. I thought, oh, wait a minute, here comes a bit of character depth. He's just killed that guy, and he's going to just not care. And that's all of a sudden, I'm going to have like a really deep and intimate handle on who Chaplet is. Nah, guy's totally fine. It gets laughed off, and there's no consequence whatsoever. And that's that.
It's unrelated to his actual accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got a completely squandered Gene Hackman, which is a crime in itself, who gets the sort of obligatory for these types of films coach speech. 1 hour and 20 minutes into the film, I took a note of it. 1 hour and 20 minutes into this film, he gets his first coach speech, despite effectively not being in the rest of the film at all, and certainly not doing any coaching. And then, so you've got all this happening. I don't believe anybody cares what they're doing, especially not the main character. You've got the weird, misleading music, then like weird bits like this completely clueless female reporter who apparently has no idea about skiing and is also unaware that the girls also ski, but she wouldn't want to do that herself, so it's not to be countenanced.
That's a really curious character.
Yeah. And then the other thing that kind of threw me, and I know this doesn't actually matter, but it's to do with sound again. I just found it odd. I mean, I know maybe you two have done it as well, because we didn't have a great many choices in television channels when we were wee, but I've seen quite a lot of skiing in my life because my dad used to watch Ski Sunday when I was wee. Gotta love Pop Goes Back. It is a great tune. But yeah, so I guess we all, at least when we were wee, were watching quite a lot of skiing and the Winter Olympics as well. And do you know what this film needs? Because it's one sound I associate entirely with skiing, and maybe it just wasn't a thing by the time this film was made. But
is it more cowbell?
It needs more cowbell. Exactly the word. Take them out of my mouth, Scott. This film needs more cowbell because every time I've ever seen downhill racing, there's always these cowbells being sounded by the crowd, and there's not one of them in this film, and it was weird. That more than anything else was the strangest thing about this film. I'm thinking, a weird note to make, I know, but you had to try and find something interesting to say about this film because the film itself has nothing.
Well, as usual, Drew, you've cut straight to the heart of the thing there.
You're going to want more cowbell.
It's going to be difficult for Scott to follow this up with any kind of insight.
Don't think I've got anything much more to add. It's just it's a strange film. I didn't actively hate it, but it wasn't offensive enough to get me into like a vitriol mode. But yeah, it's just like it's a character study that doesn't have any characters in it. I was
exactly.
waiting to get some kind of insight into either Gene Hackman's character or any character, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, it just goes on for a while and then it ends. It's like, okay. I mean, was it marketed just at being exciting footage of skiing downhill, which I guess might not have been so much of a thing in '69, but was that pulling the wool over people's eyes? This the overcranked downhill racing style, which I suppose might have been technically difficult to pull off, but the rest of the film, no, there was just nothing to get your teeth into at all in it, and nothing really of any interest. It occupied the time, but not particularly well. It was there. I mean, even given for the kind of slower pace of the era, it just doesn't have anything to do. I agree with what you're saying. It's just a very confusing experience. I just don't understand what the point of it was, and I don't understand why there's no actual plot or character development or character study or anything in it. I mean, generally speaking, it's well enough acted and well enough produced. It's just they don't have anything to do.
It's just bizarrely
a bizarre film. Yeah.
I don't hate this film, Scott. I mean, I have certainly hated other films we've talked about in the past, but no, I kind of wish that I did. I wish I sort of felt anything beyond boredom about this film.
I don't hate it. I'm just baffled by it.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Yeah,
it's and super frustrating because I can think of any number of things that I would do with that script, or do with those characters to actually make it interesting and engaging. I feel like the least amount of effort could potentially make it an incredibly interesting film, because it is well acted. It's just a weird blank canvas that exists out on there on its own as apparently a fully formed film that lots of people really highly regard.
It's well acted, but it's why acted? Why bother?
Yes.
The nail right on the head.
Yes.